Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. Today, we're going to be looking at the critical state of Pennsylvania in the 2024 election. We're going to be taking a quick look at some of the early vote data, looking at a couple of recent polls that came out of the state, and kind of just seeing where the race is headed at this point in time in Pennsylvania. So I chose Pennsylvania to do this for two different reasons. Number one, it is the largest swing state in terms of electoral votes up for grabs. This is pretty much the map of the 2024 election as it stands today. Kamala Harris has about 226 electoral votes pretty much guaranteed for her. Donald Trump has about 219. If you look at some of the states around here, across the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt, there's about 7 states that are actually going to be very competitive. The one with the most electoral votes is Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, obviously, it's a very competitive state, and it has the most electoral votes. If we go back to 2020, Joe Biden won the state narrowly. He went up by about 1.2%. He got 50.01. Trump got 84.84. And then in 2016, Trump flipped the state. He got 48.18. Hillary Clinton got 47.5, give or take. And in 2024, the polls show this state to be very, very competitive. So looking at we'll look at the polls first. Instead of Pennsylvania on 538, Donald Trump holds about a 0.5 point lead over Kamala Harris, so very thin. Trump is at about 48%. Kamala is at about 47.5. This has actually moved a little bit towards Trump over the last week or so, as recently as October 18th, and pretty much the entire cycle since Kamala entered the race, she's led by about a point or so in Pennsylvania. If we scroll down and look at a couple polls real quickly, we have Atlas Intel and Quinnipiac that came out very recently. They both have a pretty solid track record in Pennsylvania and nationwide. They have Trump up very narrowly. There's been a couple polls that have the state tied. There was one poll by YouGov and CCES that has Kamala Harris up by 1 amongst likely voters. They have another poll that has her up by 3, but I wouldn't really count that because it's adults. It really doesn't matter because we don't know how they're actually going to vote. But still, among actual likely voters, they have Kamala Harris leading by 1. So a lot of different polls that show the state very close, although over the last maybe couple of days, it looks like Trump has been doing better over Kamala Harris. But as we all know, in 2022, which we'll actually look at real quickly, because I think it's very important we look at this, in Pennsylvania in 2022, in the Senate race, late in the game, although very, very late, we're still about, Dr. Oz surged over John Fetterman in the last couple of days, and the race looked like it was going to be very close. And of course, as we all know, Fetterman won by about 4 to 5 points. And so there's been some people kind of worrying that maybe this could happen again. A big reason for why people are talking about this being a factor is because in Pennsylvania, a lot of the population votes early. They vote by mail, they vote early. And so we're going to look at some early returns now in Pennsylvania that show that actually that's not very likely to happen because Republicans are doing fairly well in early vote. So this is from yesterday, October 29th. We'll get the final update on early voting, I believe, tonight or tomorrow in Pennsylvania, and this is how early voting currently stands. So in Pennsylvania, 1.5 million votes have already been cast. That is an increase of 76,000 per day since the last time. It usually increases more and more as we get closer to Election Day, and that's what we've seen. And currently statewide, 56.9% of ballots have been returned by Democrats, 32.4 have been returned by Republicans, and 10% have been returned by members of a third-party candidate, independents, people who aren't registered with either major party. And as you can see here, this is the map. And so some of you may be worried, oh man, Democrats have a massive lead in early voting, and that is true. But if you compare it to the lead they've had in the past, it is absolutely nothing. In 2020, 70% of ballots were returned by Democrats, 20% were returned by Republicans. So Republicans are at 32, they were at 20 at this point in 2020. And Democrats are at 56. At this point in 2020, they were at 70%. And the other thing to note is the firewall. This is kind of like when you take the early vote, Democrats had a firewall of about 1 million votes. That means that when amongst votes casted early or by mail, the Democrats were set to gain, give or take, about 1 million votes. And we saw in 2020, Trump had a massive lead in Pennsylvania earlier in the night because they counted the votes cast on Election Day. And then as the night went on, they counted these 1 million votes cast early that overwhelmingly favored Democrats. They broke for Biden heavily, obviously, and Biden won Pennsylvania very narrowly. In 2024, we are seeing nothing compared to that. In 2024, Democrats only have a firewall of about 381,000 votes. And it is true, we still have 6 days left. There are some mail in votes that will have to be returned. There will still be more votes cast. But there's no way Democrats are going to hit the 1 million firewall. There's no way 700,000 people are going to return votes. And actually, there's no way they're going to hit, it's very unlikely, I should say, almost impossible, Democrats hit the 500,000 vote firewall that they claimed they needed. So the reason they said 500,000 was turnout will be a little bit lower than in 2020. A lot more voters, especially Democrats, will vote in person, but same thing with Republicans, obviously. It's just the Republicans have done a very good job at limiting this Democrat firewall. And we've seen this across a bunch of other states. I'm just using Pennsylvania as an example because it is so important on the electoral level. And as we've actually seen, if we want to look at energy, on October 16th, Democrats had about a 9-point lead in terms of votes returned, and Republicans have just cut into that a lot. October 30th, they had about a 3.1% return rate. So Republicans are requesting and now returning ballots at a rate that is matching Democrats, and they're cutting them into the margins, which is very important because we've seen some polls that show Republicans leading pretty handily in the election day vote. They won the election day vote handily in 2020. They won the election day vote handily in 2022. But Pennsylvania has been a state where Democrats have been able to do well because they've voted early. They've turned out their base, and they have had a lot of success. I mean, 1 million votes cast before the election is very difficult to make up. Even, I think, I think it was about 450,000 were cast, maybe 500,000 in 2022. Between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, but obviously a midterm year, turnout's way down, so you can't really look into that. But still, Republicans holding the Democrats to a 381,000 vote firewall is incredible, actually. It's very good. Now, obviously, this could change. Democrats could turn out heavily on Election Day. I'm not ruling that out. Obviously, Democrats could request ballots and turn them in at very high rates over the next couple of days. That is also true. But as we see here, based over the last 2 weeks or so, that return rate has been going down. So like I said, Republicans are requesting ballots and returning them at a very high level. They're doing it more often than Democrats over the last few weeks, which shows that unless Democrats have a late surge, a bunch of them turn out on Election Day, things are looking very good for Republicans in Pennsylvania at this time. We look at polling. The last couple days, Trump has led in polling. We look at the return rates. The Republicans are cutting into it. The firewall for Democrats is nothing compared to what it was, and they are making gains every day as more and more voters return their ballots. So if we want to go to the map once again very quickly, let's say that Trump wins Georgia and Arizona, which he is favored to do at this point in time. And if he's going to win those two states, he's almost guaranteed to take North Carolina as well. He won it both times in 2016 and 2020. That puts Trump at 262 electoral votes, which I personally believe this is how it's kind of going to go. Trump leads relatively handily in Georgia and Arizona in polls. And I shouldn't say relatively handily. That's not accurate at all. He's up by about 1.5 to 2 points, but still, he's polling better there, and the data looks good there for Trump. It's going to be close still, and he could still lose both those states, but you'd rather be Trump than Harris at this point in time in both those states in the Sun Belt. The Rust Belt, Michigan, looks like it's Kamala Harris is doing better there, or she's doing relatively well. Similar to the southern states, Trump could still win Michigan, but at this point in time, it looks more likely Kamala Harris is going to win that state. Nevada actually looks very good for Republicans with early votes and polling, but it is still a tough state to crack. It looked good for the GOP in 2022 and 2020 and 2016. Democrats won narrowly there all three times. So that puts the Democrats at 247, Republicans at 262. Kamala could win Wisconsin, although I think if Trump were to win Pennsylvania, as I'm trying to show with this map, he would also win Wisconsin. But let's just say Kamala Harris somehow wins Wisconsin. If Trump still wins Pennsylvania, thanks to the firewall, thanks to the return rate, thanks to all these different things, even if Kamala sweeps Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, If Trump holds on to North Carolina, which it looks like he will, there's really no reason to suggest he wouldn't at this point. He holds on to Georgia, which polling looks very good for him. He could even lose Arizona, which is a possibility. Most people agree that Trump is doing better in Georgia at this point than in Arizona, although he is doing very good in Arizona as well. So long story short, Pennsylvania, if Trump wants to have a pathway to victory, he almost has to win Pennsylvania. And if he does win Pennsylvania as well, it's basically, I don't want to say game over for Kamala, because I'm sure you could make a map where Kamala Harris still wins even if Trump takes Pennsylvania, but it's very difficult for him to do so. So the most important state in the country, with 6 days out, if you look at the early vote and the mail-ins, it's looking good for Trump. If you look at the polls, it's looking good for Trump. So really, all Republicans have to do if they want to win is keep doing what they're doing, turn out big on election day, and Trump should win Pennsylvania at this point in time. Obviously, it's still possible Kamala Harris wins it, but if you just look at the data, compare it to past elections, things do look very good for Trump in the Keystone State. So if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like and subscribe for more.